peeps, it's LA Knight, and I am back to rock your book-loving world with my review of This Monstrous Thing by Mackenzie Lee. But before we get to that, I just want to say, cats are funny. Now, I have cats, so that's why I bring this up. I just went into my room to go and get something real fast, and as I opened the door to leave my room, my cat Spot was like, oh boy, the bedroom! Yay! We're gonna go hang out! Mommy's gonna cuddle me, and it's gonna be great! And he ran into the bedroom, jumped up on my bed, and then looked at me like, come on! And then I was like, okay, bye, Spot. And he was like, eh. He does this every time I go in the bedroom. It's not like he doesn't know. He's a funny little dude. Anyway, so This Monstrous Thing by Mackenzie Lee is a sort of alternate history explanation of where Mary Shelley got the idea for Frankenstein. Now, originally, what it was Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker, Lord Byron, and Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley's, I believe, at the time, boyfriend. It might have been her husband then. I don't remember. I don't remember when exactly she married the guy. But anyway, so those four people, from what I understand, were having a contest, and they were basically like, who can make up the scariest story? And that's where Bram Stoker came up with Dracula, and that's where Mary Shelley came up with Frankenstein. I have no idea what the other two people came up with. I'm not really a big reader of Lord Byron or Percy Shelley, although I do like Lord Byron's poetry for the most part. So originally that's where Frankenstein came from, but in this book, I was gonna say in this book, and then I was like, in This Monstrous Thing? That's the title. What was I going to say originally? This book. In this book, the it's like a steam. I don't want to say steampunk because like there's mechanical men, there's like robots, and it like if people didn't know better, they'd say it was steampunk, but it's actually clockpunk because most of the technology isn't steam powered. It's powered by clockwork mechanisms. So clockpunk is sort of like the era before steampunk, although steampunk came out before clockpunk did, but it's the era before the steam engine industrialized technology. So in this clockpunk world, but see, clockpunk is awkward to say, so from now on I'm going to say steampunk, and you'll know what I mean. So in this steampunk alternate universe, Mary Shelley still exists, the countries, as we knew them at the time still existed, blah, 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 blah. But what's going on is that there is a class divide between regular people and people I shouldn't say regular people. Fully able-bodied people and disabled people who use clockwork prosthetics. And I've seen this before, and the first time I saw it was in Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and at the time I didn't like that aspect of the storyline, that extreme prejudice against people using prosthetics, because people use prosthetics all the time in the real world, and it's like not that big of a deal, except I read Cinder when it came out several years ago before I became disabled, and it turns out, yes, actually, there is a lot of prejudice against people with disabilities, including people who require prosthetics, and I didn't know that at the time. But I know now. Yay. So there's this like class divide between the able-bodied people or people who choose not to use clockwork prosthetics but are still disabled. Although, like, that's the thing. It's like it's an interesting commentary on ableism in general, because in this world there are people who are able-bodied, there are people who are disabled because there's a war going on. And so people are being injured in the war. And then also just people get hurt, like in their everyday life. People have accidents. My dad used to work on the railroad when he was really young, and he told me when I was a kid that one of the ways you could tell someone who'd worked on the railroad the longest was how many fingers they didn't have. So, work, life, war is not the only thing that makes you lose a limb. But the thing is this is back in like the 1800s, so if you lose a limb and you don't use a prosthetic, and depending on what limb you lost and what your job is, you could be shit out of luck at that point. And you may not be able to work. If you're a farmer, like, the thing is, if you don't use, what's the word? Like, aid devices. Is that the phrase? I don't know. You get what I mean, though. If you're handicapped and you need some kind of aid, but you don't use it, like, that restricts what you're able to do. I mean, that is the nature of being handicapped. And so, in a world where there's no kind of assistance financially for people who are disabled, who can't use, who because of society cannot use prosthetics, but if they use prosthetics, they can't work because they're considered second-class citizens and they're considered, like, blasphemous monsters. Like, that's an interesting... I didn't realize it when I read it the first time. Again, because... Well, actually, when I read it the first time, the reason I didn't get it was because I was sick. And, like, deliriously sick. This was either one of the times when I was, like, super out of it because of my allergy meds, or I had the flu. Because I've had the flu, like, 3 times in the last 5 years, and it blows so bad. But, so at the first time I read it, I didn't really pick up on this because I was more focused on just getting through the book and seeing what it was about. But there's a really interesting commentary on the fact that basically handicapped people in that society don't really have any options, because they can either not use, prosthetics, and then maybe not be able to work just because they physically can't do it, and therefore then they, like, don't have any money, and they end up poor and homeless and stuff, or they can use the prosthetics, but then the laws and society is structured in such a way that by doing so they are then being oppressed on a supposedly different grounds, but it's actually just based on ableism. It was a really interesting like, commentary, on that concept. And considering how short the book is, I really, really got to give Mackenzie Lee serious kudos for being able to attack that sort of ableist structure in such a nuanced way, considering that she also had to tell a story that was sort of relevant to that, but not really, sprouted out of that, but wasn't about that. And then also had limited space because books can only be so long. So that's like the background of the book, is that's what's going on in the country that the main character's in. The main character is best friends with Mary Shelley. Before they were best friends, and then he found out that she was quote unquote married. In the book, she is not married at this point. This is, from what I understand, Mackenzie Lee has said this is historically accurate, and she looked it up. Mary Shelley was basically living as Percy Shelley's common law wife while he was still married to his first wife, for a couple years. And so that's the time period that when the main character, and I just finished this book, but I cannot think of the boy's name. I don't know why. I remember everyone else's name except his. Hold on, I wrote it down. Okay, it's Alistair. It's spelled with a D, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Alistair. Anyway, so, Alistair and Mary, like, he's got this huge crush on Mary, and now, I will say, I'm gonna say this, I really liked a lot about the book. What I didn't like was Mackenzie Lee's portrayal of Mary Shelley, which is interesting, because I thought Mary Shelley came across as, like, a total bitch in this book, really. And Mackenzie Lee, I thought Mackenzie Lee didn't like Mary Shelley. Like, that's what I got the impression, that she really did not like this historical figure. And then in the afterwards, she's like, yeah, Mary Shelley's, like, so amazing. I'm like, really? Because I did not get the impression you thought that from what you had her do and say in this book. But whatever, I guess that we have different opinions on what is acceptable behavior, I'm assuming. And so Alistair and Mary, like, sort of have a little bit of a romance going on, a little bit, but at the same time, she's quote unquote married to Percy Shelley, and also, like, he's married. Like, I don't know. There was a lot of quote unquote bohemian sexual mores going on in Mary Shelley's day with that particular set. I mean, like, basically she ran away from home and this is in real life, she ran away from home to hook up with this famous poet, and, like, poets were considered, like, low class because, they were poets and they penned fiction and they drank and they smoked and they hung out with actresses. Oh dear. So she runs away from home to be with this man and his friends, his poet friends, his novelist friends, his artist friends, his actress friends, actor and actress friends. Like, for a long time, like, a lot of these people now are lauded in modern society, at least in America, you know, writers and actors and dancers and stuff. But back then, like, basically being an actress or a dancer or an opera singer, like, that's like a big deal now, right? Like, that's like, you know, hoity-toity, la-di-da type stuff. Back then, that was like a barely half a step up from being a prostitute. Now, part of that was because a lot of those women did actually serve as mistresses to rich men. I read in a different book where they explained that that was actually a way for women who were in professions that they couldn't do forever, like being a dancer. You can't dance forever. Eventually, your body's gonna wear out. Like most female dancers don't dance in you know, ballet, as example, on point ballet past the age of like 30 or 35. It's just too hard on your body. You know, I mean, the older you get, the more likely you are to like break toes, rip out your knee, blah, blah. That was in one of the Flowers in the Attic books. That happened to the female lead. She decided to dance like one last performance, and she was like 33 or 32, and she, like, in the middle of one of these moves that she'd always been able to do before, she ripped out like her ACL or something in her knee, and like she walked with a limp for like a year, and like she would never do any kind of dancing ever again. Like, it was a huge deal. Anyway, so sorry, I sometimes go on tangents. I'm sorry, but hey, it's educational. Anyway, so Alistair and Mary are friends, and Alistair has a brother. So it's actually the three of them. It's his brother Oliver, and then Alistair, and then Mary Shelley. And they're friends. And then, because of, you know, stuff going down, Oliver ends up dying. And Alistair is now this is all before the book started. Alistair is devastated. And so he basically pulls a Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, and brings his brother back to life. But his brother is a little brain damaged, probably from lack of oxygen. His brother is horrified and traumatized, like, in a body horror way, by what has been done to his corpse, which is not a corpse anymore. Like, it's this whole big thing, and it's too much for Mary Shelley, so she ends up leaving. And Alistair is taking care of Oliver, who has to be kept in seclusion because he's not fit company for humans. And part of that is because he's so angry, which, you know, is understandable. He's just super messed up from what happened. And then Alistair's parents get arrested because it turns out his dad makes clockwork parts for prosthetics, which is against the law. And so, and they're called those mechanics who make the clockwork parts are called shadow boys. And so Alistair is a shadow boy, his brother was a shadow boy, his dad is a shadow boy. And so his mom and his dad get arrested. All this shit goes down. He ends up having to team up with this doctor, who's like a total douchebag, and only wants him because Alistair did the thing where he brought Oliver back to life, because the guy wants to know how it happened. The other thing is that for a while, Oliver doesn't realize that he died. He thinks he was just badly hurt. So this is a secret that Alistair is carrying around the whole time. It's like super dramatic. The cover's really beautiful, by the way. I just wanted, because I look at the covers of the books that I'm reviewing while I'm talking about them. The cover is so beautiful. It's gothically beautiful. And I don't mean gothic like, oh, I wear black and I'm a goth, ha ha ha, like, you know, my immortal Tara Gillespie or whatever. I mean gothic like architecture, like late 1800s literature. It was a dark and stormy night, silhouettes and shadows. It's really beautiful. It's a really great choice for the cover art. So Alistair teams up with this crazy douchebag doctor, and Dr. Douchebag is like, yeah, we're gonna do this shit. Anyway, so this all culminates in this big thing where Oliver basically like throws the biggest bitch fit of his life because he read Frankenstein, which came out after he came back to life. Guess who wrote Frankenstein? Mary Shelley. Guess how she came up with the idea? She wrote it about Alistair and Oliver, and this is this whole big thing because Oliver's a secret, and so Alistair's like, the fuck, you wrote about what happened, and Oliver thinks Alistair did it. And because it's not written under Mary's name at the time. And so he's like, I know what you did. You did this so you can make money off me. I'm not your freak show. And Alistair's like, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. And Mary's like, yeah, I did it. And Alistair and Oliver are both like, what? And she's like, yeah, because it was just such a good idea and I had to write it down. And they're like, what? And like, oh my gosh. So it's a really interesting book, and there's some really good, I think, some really good lesbian rep. There's a girl that teams up with Alistair and helps him out, and like, I was worried that they were gonna be a thing, because I'm like, I feel like there's too much going on right now for him to also be hung up over this girl that he's teamed up with. But he wasn't. They do have to kiss at one point, but that's because they're like posing as lovers so they don't get caught doing something they're not supposed to. It's not a big deal. But no, she's a lesbian. She like straight up admits it. She's like, yeah, I'm a lesbian. And he's like, oh, okay. And it's not a big deal. Like, she was worried it was going to be a big deal for him, but he's just like, oh, okay, I don't care. And so, I thought that was pretty cool. She's in most of the book, too, and she doesn't die, which is nice, because, like, I'm getting so sick of the whole bury your gays trope. I'm looking at you, Shannon McGuire. Actually, I'm not, because I really like your books, and also, like, I know you have a lot of stuff to worry about right now. Shannon McGuire is really cool, but, in the 2 books of hers that I've read so far, the queer kids kind of get, there's, like, 2 queer kids at least in each book, and one of the 2 always ends up something bad happens to them. In her first book, Every Heart a Doorway, the trans boy can't go home because his parents are like, no, you're a girl, and he's like, no, I'm not, fuck you guys. And in the second book, the lesbian girl's girlfriend gets murdered again. She actually gets killed I want to say, like, struck by lightning, eaten by wolves, or bitten by a wolf, something like that. I forget what it is. But she dies, and so, maybe she drowned. I forget. But, something happened to her, and so the sequel to Every Heart a Doorway is about a girl who basically wants to grow up to be Dr. Frankenstein, and so she brings this girl back to life, and they actually end up hooking up together, and then she ends up dying again. And, like, you don't actually know if she stays dead, though, because there's a chance that she could come back, that the Frankenstein girl's teacher could bring her back, and you don't know if that happens because the girl has to leave. So I'm hoping in, like, the 4th or 5th book in the series, book 3 comes out in January, and I already know what that's about, but in the 4th or 5th book in the series, that those 2 get back together again and can be happy. I'd like to see what happens then. Anyway, so it's a really interesting book. It's well paced. There's really good social commentary in it that I didn't see the first time I read it. The only thing is that Mary Shelley comes across, to me, comes across as a really bad person. I shouldn't even say a really bad person. I mean, she doesn't, like, rape children or set puppies on fire. Right? Yeah, no. She doesn't do any of those things. But writing the book about Oliver and Alistair was a really shit thing to do. That was just a horrible thing to do. I mean, I was like, are you serious? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? You bitch! Oh my god! I have a cough drop in my mouth, by the way, sorry. Because allergies and things. But I was just like, are you kidding? Like, the fact that they hung out... First of all, the fact that they hung out for, like, 6 months, and she never once mentioned that she was married, like, I don't know. I feel like that, like, as a married woman, I make a point to mention that I have a husband, especially because I don't wear my wedding ring, and it's because it doesn't fit, and I don't want to lose it because it's beautiful and I love it. Yeah, and it looks all elven and stuff, because my wedding dress was, like, Lord of the Rings style, and so, like, my wedding ring looked very elven. It all fit together. It was great, but I don't wear my wedding ring, and so I make a point to mention that I'm married, and, like, and also just, like, you talk about your spouse, unless your spouse is, like, a complete a-hole, and you don't want to be around him, like, them, ever, and so you, like, make a point never to talk about them. But if you like your spouse, which I'm assuming since they weren't actually married and she was sticking around him, she really did like Percy Shelley, if you really like your spouse, why wouldn't you talk about them? And yet somehow she managed to hang out with Alistair and Oliver for, like, 6 fucking months before mentioning, oh yeah, by the way, I'm married. I was like, what? Like, why didn't you mention this sooner? And then, like, okay, so, like, and then, Alistair got kind of upset about that, which I can understand, but he wasn't, like, a dick about it, which I liked. Like, he wasn't like, bitch, how dare you not tell me? He was just like, oh, what? You're married? Oh. well, shit. Oh, okay. What's his name and stuff. And you know that he's not being an asshole because it's from his point of view. So you know he's not being like, I don't believe you and stuff, which a lot of guys will do. You know, don't talk to me, I have a boyfriend. Really? What's his name? You know, I hate when guys do that. So like that, I don't know, I did not like Mary in this book like at all. The thing where she didn't tell them she was married, the thing where she freaking wrote and published a book talking about a secret that could get Alistair arrested and his brother murdered, I feel like was like the dumbest, like, cause Mary Shelley was not a dumb person. Okay, she helped further the invention of science fiction. She did not invent science fiction, contrary to popular opinion. Isaac Asimov says that she did, but technically, Margaret Cavendish was the first person to write an actual scientific, sci-fi, science fiction. I almost said scientific. Science fiction novel. She wrote The Burning World, which is about interdimensional travel. And that came out like 150 years before Frankenstein. So, and the thing with the interdimensional travel wasn't magical dimensions like the Chronicles of Narnia. It was scientific interdimensional travel. Like, it talked about like dimensions and particles and the ether, which later in the 60s was proved not to exist. But until the 60s, 70s, people thought that it existed. The guys who proved that it didn't exist got the Nobel Prize for science, actually, trying to prove that it did exist. Their research ended up proving that their hypothesis was wrong, but the science and the math that went into it was so impressive that they still got the Nobel Prize. So, you know, that's pretty cool. But anyway, so, like Mary Shelley in real life was a very intelligent young woman, and she managed to survive, not only survive, but thrive as a girl in her late teens who defied most, if not all, conventions set around her to make her do what society wanted her to do. She managed to basically say, fuck you, society, numerous times, and still managed to end up mostly happy. She got the guy she wanted. She managed to, now granted, she did have to put up with a lot of shit from other people, but the things that she wanted, she got. She got the guy she wanted. She got the house she wanted. She got the writing career that she wanted. She got all those things. And she managed to do it while also circumventing society's sexist expectations. So the fact that she is that smart in real life and that stupid in the book was one of the reasons why I got the distinct impression that that Mackenzie Lee didn't like her, but apparently she did. And then the other thing is there's a standoff at one point where Oliver is like, give us Mary Shelley or we're gonna start killing people. And it was something like literally hundreds of people were gonna die, including children, if she didn't come forward, and she wouldn't do it. She just wouldn't. It wasn't even like an agonized decision. She didn't even feel bad. Like, that was the thing. She wasn't even like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it. I mean, those poor people, but like, it's not fair to ask me to do it. She was just like, nope, not doing it. I don't want to die. He's a monster. He's crazy. I don't want to go near him. It's not happening. And Alistair was like, what about all the people? She's like, I don't care. I was like, really? Wow. So, like, this is like the bitch version of Mary Shelley. Oh my gosh. But it's such a good book. It's not really scary. It's more kind of creepy, suspenseful, and a little angsty, you know, some teen angst. But that was the thing about Gothic literature, there's all the angst. This is like a perfect modern Gothic novel for teens. So, yeah, that's, This Monstrous Thing. And Mackenzie Lee has other works, I just haven't read them, so I don't know, like, if they're the same style or the same topic. I read the summary for her latest book, and I wasn't interested. I think it was The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue was the one I'm thinking of, which didn't really strike me as interesting. So I don't know if that's, like, similar to This Monstrous Thing or not. But This Monstrous Thing is pretty good, and it's probably, I feel like it's on sale, or it's not that expensive, although I have Amazon Prime, so that might be why. Anyway, thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed what you heard, like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to check me out on Archive of Our Own, DeviantArt, Etsy, fanfiction.net, fictionpress.com, fanfiction.net, Goodreads, Patreon, Pinterest, Tumblr, Twitter, Wattpad, YouTube, or you can buy me a coffee, and I'll paste all those links in the doobly-doo down below. Thanks so much, and I love you all, and a special shout-out to my patrons, to my patrons, Lorian O'Brien, Whitney H., Cynthia S., Chelsea T., and Belle A. I love you guys. Happy November-ween. Bye!